Hey, what's up, y'all? Matt and Mixes on the mic, and today we are going to be talking about the 5 most surprising and the 5 most disappointing teams in the NBA this season. We're going to start off with the positives, the surprising teams. The first that I'm going to cover is the Boston Celtics. The Celtics, of course, are playing this season without their superstar Jason Tatum. He, tore his Achilles in the playoffs against the Knicks, so this season they didn't really have the most expectations compared to what they usually have, but so many guys have stepped up with that roster. Of course, Joe Mazzulla is putting on a coaching masterclass, and Jaylen Brown having a career season. Just yesterday, he was announced as the first time in his career he's going to be an all-star starter. And, without Jaylen Brown, they would not be where they are, obviously. Now, the second surprise team, by the way, this is not in any order, that I'm going to be talking about is the Toronto Raptors. The Raptors' last trade deadline, they traded for Brandon Ingram. He didn't end up playing last season for the Raptors, but they gave him an extension. They kind of wanted to give this thing a try, and it's been a lot better than most people would have expected. Brandon Ingram, he's playing like an all-star, very likely make his second all-star appearance. He's scoring very efficiently, getting buckets, doing everything. And the Raptors, they are the 4th seed, which is very impressive for this roster. They definitely still have some holes, but they got Brandon Ingram, Scotty Barnes, 2-star level players, and from there, it just makes things a lot easier, particularly in this East where there's just not a lot of major competition. You just kind of have to try to compete while you can with this team. And I think if they can get one more good piece, I think they have a legitimate chance. So the third surprising team I'll be talking about is the Miami Heat. Last trade deadline, they traded Jimmy Butler, who, by the way, just tore his ACL last night. That's awful news. But anyway, and they traded Jimmy Butler. Last season, they barely squeaked into the playoffs that's a 10th seed. They won the play-in tournament. They got destroyed in the first round. And then this season, they just didn't really have much expectations because they're going to have to play an entire season without Jimmy Butler. But they made a move to get Norman Powell, and he is built off what he did with the Clippers last season. Will very likely make his first All-Star appearance this season. And Spoelstra is proving that just give him an NBA-level roster, and he will figure it out. And it just really just shows you that Spoelstra is one of the greatest coaches ever. Because this roster should not be basically where it was last season. And, it's just a significantly worse roster. You don't have Jimmy Butler anymore. So now the fourth surprising team I'm going to be talking about is the San Antonio Spurs. This team's kind of interesting because I think a lot of people did have a lot of expectations for them heading into this season. Hopefully, mostly healthy Victor Wembanyama. You're going to get a full season of De'Aaron Fox. So there was expectations for them to, make the playoffs, be at least somewhat competitive, but they've been a lot better, particularly in their performances against the Thunder, which you're seeing right here. They 3-1 them in the regular season. And, they could prove to be the biggest threat to the Thunder's repeat, and I don't think anyone was quite expecting that. And, of course, just overall, they're currently the 2nd seed, which is another thing that I don't think people really expect, especially with Wemby missing a lot of games. But Fox, he kept them secure even when Wemby was hurt. And, I just think it just shows you that duo does have lots of potential if they can keep them on the court, because they won without each other. So the final surprising team I'm going to be talking about is the Phoenix Suns. Of course, this offseason they traded Kevin Durant to the Houston Rockets, but I think one thing that kind of got overlooked is that when they got rid of Kevin Durant, they got a lot of good defensive depth pieces and just overall good depth pieces that made them a very deep roster. Now they got a star-level player in Devin Booker, and they've surrounded him with good amounts of talent, and that's allowed them to be better than they were last season with Kevin Durant. Dylan Brooks, he's having a career year next to Booker. And Coach Jordan Ott, his first year, he's already proven to be one of the best coaches in basketball, especially on the defensive end. So the Suns are just really, even I was optimistic about them, but not this optimistic. This is just out of nowhere, and the Suns have something nice going. Let's see what they can do with this from here. Maybe they can get a star without sacrificing the depth. Not sure how that would work, but that would be amazing if Booker can get another star in Phoenix. So now we get to move on to the disappointing teams. So the first one I'll be covering is the Memphis Grizzlies. So the real issue with the Grizzlies is Ja Morant. He hasn't been healthy. Even when he's healthy, he hasn't been good. So I just don't know how this roster can be fixed without trading Ja Morant. I think there's clearly a divide between Morant and the Grizzlies, and I don't think it's fixable. I think at this point, I think it's just best to move on. And the Grizzlies, they're just kind of clinging onto a play-in spot at this point. They're in a competition with another team I'm going to be talking about later. And Jaren Jackson Jr., he's had to kind of try and step it up, but there's only so much he can do. He's kind of a limited player on the offensive end because he doesn't rebound a lot. So this is the other team I was talking about that's competing for that kind of final play-in spot in the West. It's the Los Angeles Clippers. They are a very veteran roster. They are a very expensive roster. Despite this, they got off to an awful start. Harden had to basically put the team on his back, and it just wasn't working out. The Thunder were looking like they were going to get one of the highest picks in the draft this season. It's a very good draft, too. But to be fair to them, since Kawhi Leonard has gotten healthy, they have looked a lot better. But at the end of the day, they're still like the 10th, 11th seed. And for a roster, again, this veteran, this expensive, you have to have higher expectations than barely squeaking into the play-in tournament. And just long-term, I think this roster just does not have a lot of ability to succeed. But they're going to have to kind of keep running with it because they don't own their pick. They really just don't have a future. They kind of have to just ride this out for as long as they can. So this is the final Western Conference team I'll be talking about in terms of disappointing teams, and it will be the Dallas Mavericks. So listen, I get it. Kyrie, he's going to probably miss the season with his ACL injury. AD, he's been hurt. But at the end of the day, I don't think people expected it to be this bad. I was at least expecting like a play-in tournament or something, just a tournament spot or something. But they are a bottom-of-the-barrel team right now. And really the only thing that's keeping optimism high in Dallas, if anything, is that Cooper Flag, after a rough first month of the season, has really started to live up to his expectations. He's very likely going to win Rookie of the Year. He's just doing a little bit of everything. A lot of everything, actually. So that's at least something. But still, this team does not have much to look forward to, for being honest. But, and of course, even their role players have kind of had injuries as well. So I guess really injuries are a big reason why they're disappointing. But still. So now let's head over to the Eastern Conference, where the biggest disappointing team by far is the Milwaukee Bucks. And listen, they, of course, lost Damian Lillard. First to the Achilles injury, and then they ended up releasing him, which was kind of a messed up move, if you ask me. But it's not like he was going to play anyway, so it doesn't affect the season. But still, they have Giannis Antetokounmpo. No other roster does. So you'd at least expect them in this Eastern Conference to have decent seeding, but that hasn't really been the case. They're fighting for their play-in lives, really. And I think it's just unacceptable for a team that's employing Giannis to be this bad. I think it's Ryan Rollins. He's been a surprisingly good piece. I don't think people are expecting that from him, but everything else has just not worked out. Giannis even has dealt with injuries, but when Giannis is healthy, he's playing very good, which is obviously no surprise. But yeah, they just need other pieces. So now we're going to wrap this up with the Indiana Pacers. The Pacers, they made the finals last season. They made it all the way to a Game 7. Lost to the Thunder, and arguably an even more painful loss was Tyrese Haliburton to an Achilles tear during that game. He's going to miss this entire season. And listen, the Pacers, obviously they weren't going to compete for a championship without Tyrese Haliburton. But they are legitimately one of the worst teams in basketball, and I don't think people are really expecting that. I think a big reason for that loss is Miles Turner. He left in free agency, but Jay Huff has been a decent replacement. So even that's a little surprising, but he's not really the shooter that Turner is. But Siakam playing at an all-star level, but it just doesn't seem to matter. They just cannot find consistent ways to win without Tyrese Haliburton. I think it does show just how truly impactful he was. I think in that 2020 class, he's probably the second most impactful player besides Edwards. And I think some people were underrating that just because the roster on paper is good, but just without him, it doesn't do much.